This is the sound of a nation becoming. The cry of tomorrow. A revolution, messy and miraculous.
I stand on this stage tonight and in this theater surrounded by dreamers.
Hamilton has gotten the attention of everybody, from writers to teachers to politicians to students to historians to theater nerds. So many different kinds of people.
This is the story of America then, told by America now.
But what is it about this show that gets people of all different backgrounds to be interested in it? Is it the writing, the cast, the crew, the music, the dancing, the set? Or is it some combination of all of those things?
This is for all of us. Hamilton, an American musical.
That's exactly what I'm going to try to figure out today, so come along.
Click, boom!
I like Hamilton a lot, and so do a lot of other people. But in trying to describe why, you seem to have two choices. You can do what Stephen Colbert did and make it a joke.
My first reaction was just like, oh, this is very interesting, this is very different. I wonder how long they can sustain this. And then you go, oh, this is actually quite magnificent. And then 2 hours later, I'm going, why am I crying over Alexander Hamilton?
Or you can do what Jimmy Fallon did and list a few reasons until your head kind of just explodes.
The other actors are just phenomenal. I mean, you have just guys playing multiple roles. You have there's black people playing white people. Like
yes, it's just crazy. It's anarchy.
Yes, I know, but it's exactly what should be happening right now. And I was thinking all this stuff, you know, as there's tears in everyone's eyes. You made me laugh so hard in the play, but made me think. You made me cry.
But I want to do more than that. I actually want to break down why it works so well. But to do that, I need to do what every YouTuber that's ever talked about Hamilton has done, and go back to the White House. Lin-Manuel Miranda had been invited by the Obamas to perform a song from his Tony Award-winning musical, In the Heights, about the life of a New York City block, and fitting very well the theme of unity and togetherness they wanted to show. He instead chose to perform a song from
a hip-hop album. It's a concept album about the life of someone I think embodies hip-hop, Treasury Secretary Alexander Hamilton.
This next part is important, because this is the first time anyone has ever heard anything about what would eventually become a musical nominated for a record number of Tony Awards. And what does the audience do? They laugh.
You laugh, but it's true.
And he's right. This phenomenon is actually one that he's aware of.
I know that Hamilton's like a bad elevator pitch. Like rapping founders, like what? No, like what happens to them is what happened to me, is like they get sucked into the story and they go, oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, is that
I didn't know. And then by the end, they're all like,
yes. Yes.
Hamilton telling a story that most people don't know about and that doesn't sound like it would work, ironically enough, gets more people into it, albeit to see if something this crazy could work. But being based on an unknown story isn't enough. There are plenty of musicals based on unknown stories that haven't exploded like this. But Hamilton, once it drops people in confusion, immediately hooks them because the writing is just so good. I know, hot take. Hamilton is good. The title kind of gave away that opinion. But Lin-Manuel Miranda has a vision for musicals that no one else seems to have, being able to see this as a show when others couldn't, and even going so far as to be confused that no one else beat him to it.
I was on Google saying, someone's already made this into a musical. How can anyone not have made this into a musical?
Well, because no one else thought of it. But he could see it and its potential, and he fully committed to it.
I was on my way to my friend's birthday party when that lyric showed up, when death doesn't discriminate showed up in my head. The idea came on the A down. I started writing it down in the train, in La Quinita of the A train. Break dancers are dancing, I have my headphones on. I get out, the whole chorus comes all at once. I write it down, and I suddenly see the shape of the whole song. I was just like, the chorus is Burr, that's who he is. I go into my friend's party. I go, hey, what's up, man? Happy birthday. I gotta go. I get on the L train, and I write the rest of the song on the way back home, from the L to the A back up to 207th Street.
And that commitment leads to some truly top-notch writing. But don't just take my word for it.
Sometimes in hip-hop, we say real, recognize real. So I could recognize immediately that Lin was a real one and that this was a real story.
There's double and triple meanings and layers upon layers. I mean, I've had to see Hamilton 8 or 9 times to get references that I didn't get the first 8 times that I saw it.
What Lin was able to do is create different styles for each character.
But while the show does stand on its own, it's clear that it was inspired by a lot of other works.
Do you take notes from contemporary music or from classical music? Like, what inspires you?
That's a fantastic question. The answer is all of it. The answer is all of it because Hamilton required so much more of me
than I ever reached for before. You know, I always say that when I got the idea for Hamilton, I feel like a mosquito that hit an artery. It just kept giving the more research I did. I tried to use every possible music at my disposal. And again, and here, my heroes are Kander and Ebb and Stephen Sondheim and Charles Strauss and all of these greats. I looked to Eminem and Big Pun and Rakim and all of the MCs who rhymed 12 syllables on a line when one at the end of the line would suffice. That's how you get a score.
And that influence is visible all throughout Hamilton, from references to musical theater,
Sit down, John, you fat mother!
Say I do. I do, I do, I do, I do, I do.
You've got to be carefully taught.
You've got to be carefully taught. If you talk, you're gonna get shot.
to references to various hip-hop songs.
I'm only 19, but my mind is older.
Only 19, but my mind is older.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It's the 10 dual commandments.
It's the NOTORIOUS. You just lay down slow.
I am the A-L-E-X-A-N-D-E-R. We are meant to be.
Another influence of hip-hop is the use of clever rhyme schemes, internal rhyming, and rhyming patterns that you wouldn't necessarily be used to seeing in ordinary show tunes.
The $10 founding father without a father got a lot farther by working a lot harder, by being a lot smarter, by being a self-starter. By 14, they placed him in charge of a trading charter.
And then there's maybe the most famous use in Hamilton, from My Shot.
I'm past patiently waiting, I'm passionately smashing every expectation, every action's an act of creation. I'm laughing in the face of casualties of sorrow. For the first time I'm thinking past tomorrow.
Plus, it's just really catchy. Here are some of my favorite musical moments from the show.
I know him, that can't be. That's that little guy who spoke to me all those years ago. What was it, 85? That poor man, they're going to eat him alive. Number 2, if they don't grab a friend, that's your second.
Your lieutenant, when there's reckoning to be reckoned.
Number 3,
have your seconds meet face to face.
Negotiate a peace.
Or negotiate a time and place.
And when my time is up, have I done enough? Will they tell my story?
Have you read this? Alexander Hamilton had a torrid affair, and he wrote it down right there. Highlights. It must be nice, it must be nice to have Washington on your side.
So he's doubled the size of the government. Wasn't the trouble with much of our previous government size?
Look in his eyes, see how he lies.
Follow the scent of his enterprise.
But these songs don't exist in a vacuum. Lin-Manuel Miranda makes frequent use of motifs, which are musical ideas that tie songs together and make the show feel so much more connected. And this show uses them in such a clever way, tying characters, ideas, and even locations together. But this music didn't come out of the box fully formed. In fact, a lot of his collaborators have talked often about the original demos that would eventually become the music of the show.
Lin's demos are gold.
Alright, let's listen to one of those demos.
I grabbed my sister and whispered, oh no. Ha! This one's mine. Hey, maybe I'm a little crazy.
Let's listen to the rest of that idea.
Lin's demos are gold, and because they continue to evolve and grow.
That would become helpless, and the ability to change things, and even to cut fully formed numbers like congratulations, makes the show so much better.
Let's review. You took a rumor a few, maybe two people knew, and refuted it by sharing an affair of which no one has accused you. I begged you to take a break, you refused to. So scared of what your enemies will do to you. You're the only enemy you ever seem to lose to. You know why Jefferson can do what he wants? He doesn't dignify schoolyard taunts with a response. So yeah, congratulations.
That doesn't just come from Lin-Manuel Miranda. It comes from the whole creative team, or the cabinet as they're called, and the system they have in place to make it all work.
Tommy has a way of setting a room where the best idea in the room wins. And, you know, if I bring in a song and I see Andy's already leapt to his feet and Alex is already playing with variations, I'm like, okay, we're pretty far along the course. If I bring in a song and it's quiet, I go, okay, swing and a miss. These guys are never prescriptive. It's never the song needs to do this or the song needs to do this. It's, all right, we can go back to basics of, here was my intent, here's what you're hearing, and how do we shorten the distance between my intent and what you're getting.
They're a team of people that trust each other enough to say, hey, award-winning composer, hurry up.
For the first few years, it was just happening in my head on vacations, on various vacations, because it would always pop up then. It was like the ghost of Hamilton would be like, hey, write a song for King George, which got written on my honeymoon. And I think finally, I'd written like 2 or 3 songs, and I performed one of the songs at a fundraiser for Ars Nova, which is a theater we work with a lot. And Tommy was like, we should start setting deadlines, because if you're gonna average a song a year, this is gonna take us a very long time.
And as Alex Lackamore points out, a lot of the reason that the pieces fit together as well as they do is just because of the members of the team.
You could pick 4 other people, a different choreographer, a different director, a different songwriter, and it wouldn't click in this way. But for whatever reason, there's just a certain kind of DNA, certain kind of common language amongst all of us that it all just kind of clicks in.
I mean, just watch how fast they go from a problem with a number to a solution, basically without saying any words.
I don't want to lose the da-da-da.
Okay.
That's worth saving to me.
So does that mean start it, then not
starting
in the basement?
Glass to freedom.
Raise a glass to freedom. Something they can never take away.
The dude at the keyboard is Alex Lackamore, the guy in charge of the orchestrations for Hamilton. He's written a lot of great stuff that you don't normally get to listen to because there are lyrics on top of it. But just take a listen. I'd play more, but honestly, I would just end up playing the whole Hamilton Instrumentals album pretty soon, which I do encourage you to listen to, but this isn't the time for that. But for as complex as this work is, he talked about it in a way that actually confused me the first time I heard it.
All about trying to get out of the way of all the lyrics, trying to create a lot of air so that you can hear Lin rap over that.
He understands just how important it is for a show to have both the big moments and the small moments, and when to use each to create the most finely tuned experience for the people that are listening to the show and to his music.
It was really an exercise for me in just like simplicity. Like, a great example is, again, back to my shot. So we have that figure down in the bottom, but then the piano just plays this figure on the right hand. So we have all this space in between here, which is where the vocals live. So you can hear everything in between. And then when you want it to get big, that's when you add everything in the middle, and then you can beef it up. But when you really need to pay attention, you just need to just kind of clear the air and just leave the space.
But when he's not staying out of the way, he's creating very full orchestrations by giving each instrument a unique and interesting line. In his words, each instrument has its own unique point of view.
Instead of just a single line figure, the cello is going to do this, the viola is going to do this, the violin 2 is going to do this, and violin 1 is going to go. And when you put them all together,
But it's not just what each instrument is doing, it's also what instruments are in the pit to begin with, because this is Hamilton, where everything has a deeper meaning, somehow.
For Hamilton in particular, I knew that we wanted to have a 10-piece band. That was always what I had in my brain. I was thinking we're going to do a pop rhythm section, and we're going to have a string quartet, because I knew that I wanted the rhythm section to be the digital element, the real modern contemporary sound, and I wanted these 4 instruments, the strings, that you don't have to plug in. They're made out of wood. They're of the era. They were totally prominent in the 18th century. So it just felt like this really cool hybrid of sounds to have. So I always knew that was going to be the template for Hamilton.
He just described the whole point of the show entirely by what instruments are in the band. And it's that laser focus on the point of the show that allows him to make music like The Room Where It Happens. It starts out small and out of the way, and turns into one of the biggest numbers in the whole show, and it's one of my favorites. So much so that I used it in the opening of this video. And the task of bringing the music to life through visuals on stage goes to choreographer Andy Blankenbuehler, who has an equally clear viewpoint on his field.
I always see choreography, but especially with Hamilton, as sort of an impressionistic painting, where the surround of bodies has to inform what you're supposed to be looking at. Like in Impressionism, you look at one thing in focus, and everything around it points to it. And that's what we do with our lyric. Because the show is about true and deep emotion, the movement is often very strong, very wide, and very low to the floor.
And, as is quickly becoming the pattern with this show, the choreography also has another layer of deeper meaning behind every single move that each actor makes while on stage.
We're in second position, like in the spirit of the American people at that time, nice and strong. We're reaching out as if we're gesturing to all those people over there, all those people over there. Then we lean hand to heart, so it comes up almost like a Pledge of Allegiance, like the birth of the Pledge of Allegiance. Right away, we establish this vocabulary that we do all night long, where at the end of the show, obviously Hamilton does throw away his shot. So we're throwing the bullet up in the air, but in the beginning of the show, boom, we snap it down, as if to say he's not going to miss any opportunities. But we plant the seeds for that throwing away vocabulary that's going to come back much later.
By filling the choreography with motifs, just like the music itself, he manages to make the show feel so much more unified. And he also understands the importance of the cast members that will be performing this music every night, and makes sure to include them in the process of creating his choreography.
So when I finally start choreographing, what I do is I use my computer, I push the camera on, I just record everything I do in the studio. Here's a perfect example of just improvising. This is what would become Just Like My Country, I'm Young, Scrappy, and Hungry. You see, the steps aren't anything except for the pop, the timing of it. Just like my country, I'm young, scrappy, and hungry. The chin felt right, the pop felt right. Then we'll meet with dancers, and with dancers, like, that was the first improv step. Then now I'm with 3 dancers in the room, and that's the beginning of Just Like My Country, and we find the steps together.
But of course, it's not always going to be easy. Choreography is hard. Writing it is even harder. But like the rest of his teammates, he has the ability to push through and make it work.
This was probably the biggest night in Hamilton, which was a day that Lin wrote a new bridge for Room Where It Happens, and I could not choreograph the number, and I pulled an all-nighter. And it was in this all-nighter that I kind of cracked the step. Skin in the game is what we call the section. And as soon as I figured out that one section, the number just spilled out, and I just stayed up all night.
And for all the non-choreography visual elements, the mantle goes to director Thomas Kail, whose job consists of, well, it seems to be everything. That's what it says here. I mean, listen to all of the responsibilities that he had in helping the show make it to Broadway, as Lin-Manuel Miranda was writing it.
You know, it was working on all the songs, it was helping shape the narrative, it was finding the right actors, it was directing the performance, it was making sure that the sequence of events felt like a story and not just this happened, this happened, this happened.
I mean, that's a lot of jobs, and he obviously has a very clear idea of what the show is supposed to be. Watch him describe the double casting of characters and the, get this, deep meaning behind it.
There's something about the theater which allows us to meet a character played by Anthony Ramos, who is Hamilton's best friend in Act 1, and then can play Hamilton's son in Act 2, and then Oak playing Mulligan and Madison. So, and then of course we had Jasmine Cephas Jones was playing Mariah and Peggy. So we felt like there was also some important and inherent storytelling advantage to that, which is, and you see it in the opening number, like this idea that these three men fought with him, and they fought by his side in Act 1, and they fought against him in Act 2. So that to me felt like we were telling story. This is someone in his life who pushed away everybody. Hamilton was always blowing up every relationship. And there was something about the reflection back of who you were from that first part of your life through who you become, that it felt like we could use those literal mirror images by having the same characters play. And for someone like Peggy and Mariah, Peggy Schuyler, a young woman born to privilege and opportunity, and Mariah given none of those opportunities. And so what were the choices that those two young women have in their lives? And it was a way for us, by having the same actor play it, to ask that question as well.
And while he refuses to actually answer the question, this next clip shows just how much thought and precision he puts into every piece of the show, and how he works with actors to find what makes sense and is true to them.
Hamilton question that I need the answer to, all caps for me. What does Eliza's gasp at the end of the musical mean?
That conversation, which is distinct with each Eliza, as I'm not answering the question because I'm not going to, because I feel like that is actually between Eliza and Eliza. It just was something that came out of a very natural, organic process in rehearsal and in performance. That's not written in the script. The show ends with the final lyric that he has written and the final notes, and yet he had the understanding that there maybe was another moment that could extend beyond that. It's something that a lot of folks talk about, and I'm happy that there's a ... at the end of our show, as opposed to some sort of definitive statement.
Now that is a great non-answer. I've never heard such an eloquent "I'm not going to tell you" before. Good for you. Anyway, what was I? Right. As for the environment that all this takes place in, notice I'm just a set. Designer David Corrins is such an overachiever that he put in all this work just to audition. I reiterate, before he even got the job.
I got a copy of the script and I got a copy of the music, and the score was all of it plinked out on a computer. I did a lot of research, I did a lot of sketches, I did a whole scene breakdown figuring out what happened in every single scene, and I sat down with Tommy at the Public Theater and I showed him my sketches, and I just kind of...
How many hours did you put in before you found out the job was yours?
Oh, I don't know. 30, 40.
And just like everybody else working on this show, he put in a bunch of tiny details in the set. He seems surprised that people notice them, but I don't know why. I mean, what else are we going to do other than notice details and make video essays? Just me? That feels like it might just be me. The point is, he put a bunch of details into a set. That's the point. A bunch of details in the set.
It's fascinating. I've had experiences time and time again where I would choose the tiniest little eyelash on the face of a detail and put it on stage and have an audience member come in and say, oh, that doorknob that you chose brought me to the exact specific place. There's big wooden pieces of scaffolding and a huge brick wall and rope. Everyone can see that. There's a turntable swirling around on stage in Hamilton. But there are also so many tiny, tiny, tiny dramaturgical details, eyelashes, that are there that maybe you catch and maybe you don't, but I believe that they are informing the performer's performance and their experience, and therefore translating to the audience. And in some cases, there's just one person that will pick up on those details, and that is incredibly powerful because we're telling those stories so specifically and as specifically as we can.
But as iconic as the Hamilton set is now, it, predictably, went through a lot of different phases that were all okay, but weren't quite as good as what they ended up getting after they worked to revise it.
Hamilton could have looked like a big curved piece of parchment paper with a quill sticking out of it, which was one of the terrible ideas that we had, that it did not wind up becoming, but that was sort of the installation art version of it, and we threw it out, but we continued at it.
And as amazing as the set is, it gets brought even more to life by the fantastic lighting design of the late Howell Binkley.
You know, giving each song its own location, its time, its passion. A light through a window. I mean, that's really just, it gives me chills.
His lighting design made the stage even more vibrant and brought the audience into the story more than they already were. But of course, our world needs things, and the man in charge of those things for Hamilton was props master Jay Duckworth.
I'm astounded by the density of objects that move across the stage. You've got the glitter in there, which makes it look like champagne bubbles.
They're not all the same. So it looks like everybody's has a different glass of champagne. When they designed that burn letter, they actually spent a whole day burning all kinds of different pieces of paper to find the right one.
I'm amazed that there are so many pieces. You literally can't store them backstage. You have to fly them.
And rounding out our roster of creative team is the man in charge of costumes, Paul Taswell. He combined modern and historical pieces to create a wardrobe that was as vibrant and full of life as the actors wearing them. And all these pieces come together to form a show that perfectly gets across the point that the creative team wants to show to people.
What we're trying to do with the cast and the larger gesture of this show is say, here's a group of people that you think you can't relate to. Maybe we can take down some of those barriers and allow a reflection to be truer.
These beings never feel like they actually existed because you are only seeing them out of human scale. And what we endeavored to do was to make them human scale and remind you of what it meant to be on the ground, in the visceralness of the movement, in the vitality of the music, and in the richness of the performance.
It was exactly pulling Washington down off the oil painting. It was, let's not meet Washington standing, crossing the Delaware, somehow not falling off this tiny canoe. Let's meet him being like, I don't have enough money, I don't have enough troops, and we're losing. Which is the opposite of how he is painted in every portrait.
And the way they do this is by reframing historical events as a new, fresh story that comes alive for all the audience members.
On paper, what looks like a very dry history lesson, Hamilton traded away New York as the capital in exchange for the passage of his debt plan. But if you tell it from the perspective of Aaron Burr, who is watching all these people leapfrog past him into power, it's a thrilling, dramatic moment, and it's also the turning point for Burr to stop hanging back on his heels and lean forward and say, I want in on this life.
It's about the fracture. It's about watching where exactly the moment is that it all changes.
But it's not just the story, it's also the way they're telling it. While hip-hop sounds crazy, it actually makes a lot of sense.
I said, this is Tupac, this is Biggie, this is a hip-hop story. This is my next show.
And the people they chose to tell this story are just as important.
It's a story about America then, told by America now. The cast is inclusive, using actors of different races to play the founders of our nation. Now that is revolutionary.
That was a really early and essential conversation that we had when we were thinking about how to make this world. The reality is we wanted to eliminate any distance between then and now. So if the world looked like now and sounded like now and moved like now, then perhaps what we were able to do there is build a bridge. And it wasn't a long bridge. It was one that could get us there. You know, the generosity of this company and of what Lin has done in this show is that Lin doesn't stand on the mountaintop and tell you all the things that he knows. What this company does every night with these words and with the way that they embody these characters is they build that bridge and they build that ladder and they say, come here, come be with us. So it was an invitation. It was an invitation to everybody.
What I think is that there's something incredibly pure and fun about the casting, that our imaginations really will let us take these leaps. And that we don't have to be so closed-minded, especially in the theater, that it can be whatever we want it to be.
And that cast. They take the building blocks handed to them by the creative team and infuse them with life and energy. They were amazing singers, dancers, rappers, and of course, actors. Here are some of my favorite moments from the show.
I remember that night, I just might regret that night for the rest of my days. And when my time is up, have I done enough? Will they tell my story? Oh, I can't wait to see you again. It's only a matter
And when our children tell our story, will you read it for me? They'll tell the story of tonight.
On Tuesday, the 27th, my son was killed in a gunfight against British troops retreating from South Carolina. The war was already over. As you know, John dreamed of emancipating and recruiting 3,000 men for the first all-black military regiment. His dream of freedom for these men dies with him.
Tomorrow there'll be more of us.
Alexander, are you all right?
I have so much work to do.
Okay, so of course the show's going to be liked by musical theater people. But you know who else likes it? First Lady Michelle Obama.
It was simply, as I tell everybody, the best piece of art in any form that I have ever seen in my life.
And that isn't even the only tie that Hamilton has to the White House.
Ron Chernow's extraordinary biography of Alexander Hamilton, and lin-manuel picked up this biography at the airport for some light beach reading. But he identified a quintessentially American story. In the character of Hamilton, a striving immigrant who escaped poverty, made his way to the New World, climbed to the top by sheer force of will and pluck and determination. We hope that this helps every teacher who spent hours trying to make the Federalist Papers teenager-friendly. And we hope that they'll walk away with an understanding of what our founders got started, that it was just a start. It was just the beginning.
The historical significance of the piece is something that clearly isn't lost on anybody working on the show.
It's rare that you do a show where you have so many literal touchstones, places that support the research that you've done. It's helped keep the fire burning.
But the status of the show is allowing them to try to bring that to others, specifically to students.
Eduham is something we've been doing for years with the Hamilton show. We basically created a curriculum for schools when they're coming to visit Hamilton. They write their own pieces. They perform them for us on stage at the Rogers. Then we do a Q&A, and then we perform the show for them.
And these student pieces are actually pretty good. They're well-researched, passionate, they're well-written, they're catchy, they're about things they care about. And it's cool to see Hamilton inspire these student-written and student-performed songs. And also the titles of White House memoirs. Lin-Manuel Miranda loved that. So then the question is, does it matter that Hamilton isn't historically accurate?
Does it matter that it's not perfect history?
I just said that.
No, it doesn't matter that it's not perfect history. You kind of expect that there are going to be things that are done for dramatic license, for dramatic purposes. The really important thing, I think, is for people after they've watched it to go and find out more. You don't expect everything to be exactly the way it is in a history book.
I have 2.5 hours of your time in the theater, and our goal over the course of writing it was honor the impulse that made me think it was a musical. And to me, that was the relentlessness of Alexander Hamilton, and the fact that this is an immigrant narrative in the United States before there's even a United States, and what that means. And so you have to pare away a lot. I get tweets every day from young people who say, but what about this? Or it's John Lawrence's birthday, why haven't you said anything yet? You know, and so all the things I could not fit in the 2.5 hours I have of your time, it's exciting to see people discover that.
I don't think the purpose of theater or of art is to give answers. I think it's to ask deeper questions and ask different questions than the ones you might have had when you walked in.
Hamilton didn't really meet Lafayette, Lawrence, and Mulligan all at once in the same bar, but we're gonna meet them all at once because we gotta go. We've got a lot of story to tell, and we want to get you out before Les Mis gets out next door.
You reach a point, I think, where the research is over and you then invent the character who actually existed in history.
But they're still partly defined by what they did. That's the advantage.
Absolutely, and that's what the audience will bring into the theater with them, so you have to be aware of that, but they live in a kind of penumbral area where they are who they were, but they're also who you want them to be. None of the shows we're talking about are documentaries. None of them are book reports with songs added. I mean, ultimately, they're an artist's inventions.
Yeah, I think one of the things we really tried to do with the show is show them all as flawed. There's no saints in the show, not a one.
But all the questions about politics, about history, and about where musicals, specifically Hamilton, interact with it came into much clearer focus when Hamilton came to Disney+. Hamilton coming to Disney Plus meant that the show was instantly accessible to so many more people. They could learn the lessons, hear the history, have more conversations about the show and the people it portrays. It managed to bring the show into the current conversation.
If you had finished writing #Hamilton after viewing the events that have unfolded in the US in 2020 so far, would you have written it any differently? Any guess at how it may differ?
That's a fantastic question. One of the sort of great surprises of Hamilton is that it doesn't change. We haven't changed the text of this show since 2015, and yet it feels like it changes because the world around it changes so fast. Things that popped out when Obama was president may not be the things that get a reaction when Trump is president. Immigrants, We Get the Job Done certainly gets a different reaction. If there's anything political about the show Hamilton, its thesis is everything good or bad that was present at the founding, at the roots of the birth of this country, are still present. The fights we had then are the fights we are having now. Conversations we're having about systemic racism and abuse and police brutality and about revolution, those are all still present. I'm gratified and humbled when I see lyrics from the show at Black Lives Matter protests. But because we are dealing with the origins of this country and how it's based on ideals that we fell short of the moment we wrote them down, I'm well aware that every single one of these characters, even though they sing songs you love, are complicit in the original sin of slavery, whose legacies are still being felt to this day. The lyrics about that in the show, I think, hit differently in this conversation than they may have in 2017, 2016, or 2015. I think one of the biggest themes of the show is you don't get to control how you're remembered. You don't get to control how you're remembered or who survives you. And the show doesn't escape that fate either. And so different things within it will rise or fall based on where we are.
And that's true, because even outside of the show, this team has found all sorts of ways to reach people of all kinds. The Hamilton mixtape brought this music to new artists who could give it their own spin and could reinvent it as their own. It also brought the work to people who might not have listened to the original musical, but who can listen to and enjoy the Hamilton mixtape, purely on their own terms. The Hamil Drops, covers, and cut songs from the musical have allowed a deeper look into the show and how versatile the material is. Plus, it's really cool. I mean, I'm never going to complain about more Hamilton. The digital ham for hams have given us great moments like this.
Raise a glass to freedom.
Raise a glass?
Raise a glass.
Glass of what?
Apple juice.
Delicious. Go ahead.
Or this moment, where a cabinet battle was reimagined as a cold open to the West Wing.
Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We fought for these ideals. We shouldn't settle for less. These are wise words. Enterprising men quote them. Don't act surprised, you guys, because I wrote them. But Hamilton forgets his plan where the government assumes states' debts. Right. Now place your bets as to who that benefits. The very seat of government where Hamilton sits.
Not true. Winning was easy, young man. Governing's harder.
They're being intransigent.
You have to find a compromise.
But they don't have a plan. They just hate money.
Convince them otherwise.
Then what happens if I don't get congressional approval?
I imagine they'll call for your removal.
Sir.
Figure it out, Alexander. That's an order from your commander.
Yes, sir.
Side note, Lin-Manuel Miranda likes that show so much that they played the theme in his last Hamilton curtain call. The show encourages people to vote, to stay inside when it's necessary to do so, to learn the history that the musical admittedly didn't quite have time to teach you all about, and to learn on your own terms, to just be creative and a little bit ridiculous because, you know, well, why not? It's why the show has stayed in the public eye for so long, and it's why it won so many awards. It's the definition of what we can do if we try. It's what real creativity is, what innovation is. You could say it's why we started the country in the first place. And I'd say that's pretty revolutionary. Pun fully intended.
My wife and we're like, this might be the greatest thing like we've ever seen, ever. And you kind of look around and the other people say like, are we right? Like, this is the best thing, right? We're all on the same, but you can't say that because people are acting and performing, but they're almost in tears.